get by. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Andrea Shaw. You can check them out at ttgcanada.com and torquestrategies.com. And Andrea, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes of the podcast people should check out. Since this is part of the Top Agency series, there was a really good one with Kevin Hurrigan, who runs Spinia Tech. And Andrea, he's had an agency since 1995. So you have him beat. You've been doing this longer. But he talks about the landscape of the internet, business and agency life throughout some of the ups and the downs. And so super interesting story. Also, before we hit record, Andrea was talking about EOS and they implement EOS. I do have an interview with Gino Wickman, who wrote Traction, who started EOS. That was a really good one. And also, I have a separate interview of Mark Winters, who co-authored Rocket Fuel with Gino Wickman, and that was a really good episode as well, talking about kind of the visionary, the integrator, and having both creates Rocket Fuel. So check that episode out and more at InspiredInsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. How do we do that? We do that by helping you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the strategy, the accountability, and the full execution. So Andrew, we call ourselves the magic elves that run in the background to make it look easy for the host and the company so they can create amazing content and develop amazing relationships and, most importantly, run their business. For me, the number one thing in my life is relationships, and I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you definitely should. If you have questions, you can go to rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. And I'm excited to introduce Andrea Shaw. And Andrea's path in her career is very interesting, going from registered nurse to high school teacher to sponsorship marketing, obviously starting and running TTG Canada and Torque Strategies. She's been doing this for over, I'm not going to date you, but very experienced, several decades, over 35 years. 10 of those years were working with the 2010 Olympic and Paralympic Winter Games in Vancouver. She was responsible for raising corporate sponsorship there of over $760 million and overseeing the longest torch relay in Olympic history. She founded TTG Canada actually in 2010 at the end of the Winter Games, an effort to bring the Olympic learnings to the market as a legacy company of the games. So, and later on Torque Strategies. Andrea, thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Great to be here.
We'll talk about 760 million, but there's another number that fascinates me more than 760 million, which is 3 million. There was a point where you turned down $3 million. And most people may have thought you were crazy. Talk about that for a second.
Yeah, that was a journey like no other. When we went to Prague to put our bid in to win the right to host, to become custodians of the Olympic brand in Canada, we had a budget line item that I was very involved in of $450 million. And people said to me, there's no way you'll do that in Canada. Anyway, we went on and budgets, our dollar fell. We all know what happened to the economy. And the price of steel went up, cement went up. So the budget line item to raise sponsorship went from 450 to 550 to 650 to 760 million. So it was an amazing journey. But one of the biggest learnings that we had was we had a very clear vision and we had clear values. We all knew what those were. And if those weren't aligned, we knew that we could only be as good as the company we kept, i.e. our corporate partners. And in the circumstance that you asked about, this company started to negotiate and our entry level was $3 million. And through the negotiation process, we realized that our values were not aligned. And when you're negotiating and the other side of the table moves the goalposts from where they had said before, you quickly realize that your values aren't aligned. And that's why we walked away from $3 million. Our values were our backbone of that organizing committee, which is why, quite frankly, we got through the ups and downs that we did and had the success that we did in 2010.
Yeah, and that kind of transcends a lot of different situations, even taking on clients in general, right? So talk about maybe a highlight or two on how you actually accomplished that goal of 760 million.
Well, and it wasn't me. We were a fabulous team, headed up by John Furlong, Dave Cobb, and we had a team. So it certainly wasn't just me, but we were very, very strategic. What we had to do was turn the traditional model of sponsorship literally upside down on its head. So we sold partnerships based on storytelling and purpose and what we were trying to achieve. And so because our vision was so clear, that vision was to walk the Olympic spirit through every house and home in Canada. And I have to say, Jeremy, people thought, again, we had 10 heads. How are you going to do that in a country the size of Canada? So we knew that if we had this big vision, and we were going we were determined to achieve it, that like-minded companies like the Bells and the RBCs and the Petro-Canadas, their visions were aligned with our vision. And we knew that if we could get that alignment, that we could sell sponsorship very successfully, which the 760 million proved that to be true.
So now you talk about the idea behind starting TTG Canada.
Yeah, well, you said it in the intro. The 10 years that I worked on the Olympic Games was like a learning laboratory. It was, and as I said before, we had to turn the traditional model upside down on its head because we had to raise so much money. So a year out from our games, about 2009, I thought, okay, what's my next chapter? I've had a few journeys, as you mentioned, but I'm passionate about sponsorship marketing, very, very passionate. And I thought, what is my next chapter? And because I had been in the industry before going to the game since the mid 80s. I had seen the evolution of the sponsorship industry evolve incredibly. And so I thought, how can I be so passionate and not take all the learnings that I've learned in the games, 10 years learning laboratory, and not take them to market? So that was the impetus to me opening the doors of 2010. It was a jump. It was a jump off the cliff for sure. But I hired some of my best people, 2 or 3 people, but obviously had to pay them a salary. And I certainly didn't have, cash in the bank just to do that. So I jumped off the cliff, really being passionate about our industry. The sponsorship industry in Canada was evolving, and I was really excited to bring the learnings to market. And we're now 14 years old, so we continue to prosper and grow and try to be better every day.
And at this time, you're really focused. And by the way, if someone's listening to the audio, there's a video piece so we can see here. We're at ttgcanada.com and see this, but you were focused on events, right? Event management. What was the next milestone of a client that you were able to start to work with?
Yeah, so when we opened the doors of TTG Canada, formerly known as 2010 Group, it was primarily sponsorship sales and marketing, working on behalf of properties. And we were also doing, that was the core of that business. The Canadian Olympic Committee was a client. Whistler Blackcomb was a client. We had all kinds of great clients that we were fortunate to get fairly soon after we opened our doors. At the same time, we were doing strategic marketing initiatives with some brands, but nobody knew we were doing it because we had this Olympic halo over our heads. So in 2014, we made the decision to open Torque Strategies, which is the sister company to TTG Canada, which works primarily with brands on strategic marketing initiatives.
Yeah, and you can see here we're looking at Torque Strategies. It's interesting to hear how the thought process go with just opening kind of a sister company with a whole new brand as opposed to just releasing a service line under TTG. Because I think, companies may be listening and go, maybe I wouldn't have even thought to start a whole sister company and just release the services under TTG. Talk about that thought process.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And at the time, 2014, when we opened the company, we were concerned about people having a perceived conflict. Both companies are run completely separately. But now in the world, 14 years later, as you know, the convergence of industry, ad, sponsorship, content marketing, they're all converging with these massive global companies. And opening Torque was one of the best decisions we've ever made. And I'll cite the why is when we stepped into COVID, didn't step in, we all got hit with COVID. The event side, as you know, can imagine, the event side of our business fell through the floor. We couldn't hold the events like Rugby Sevens and World Juniors. Airports are also a big client of ours. They were hit hard. So TTG Canada was hit very badly during COVID. And Torque, in fact, held up. Brands didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to act. They didn't know how to, pivot on their marketing strategies. So Torque actually grew, and they've become an amazing company doing amazing, diverse things. And so, were we bumped and bruised in COVID? We sure were. But that decision in 2014 to open Torque, in hindsight, was one of the best company decisions we've ever made.
I want to talk a little bit about just the services of each. And I don't know if you mentioned the Rugby Sevens, the Canada Sevens Vancouver, and the Rugby Sevens event. If you were to talk about what you do with them under TTG Canada and then what you do with them under Torque Strategies, just get an idea of the difference of services there.
Great question. So HSBC Rugby Sevens is a tournament. It's a global tournament under the auspices of World Rugby, and there are 10 countries that are chosen. And Rugby Canada came to us back in early 2000 or 2012 approximately, and asked us to put a bid for Canada to have Canada host one of these 10 events. And we put the bid in under TTG. That was /Torque because both companies were involved. But we put the bid in, we won the bid, and we were brought on by Rugby Canada on the TTG side to raise all the corporate sponsorship for that event once we had won the right to host. Torque Strategies for that event did all the marketing, strategic marketing communications for that event. So that's a great example of how these sister companies really, really complement each other. And clients are now realizing that because we have such deep expertise on both sides of the fence, that many of our clients are now working both with TTG Canada as well as Torque Strategies.
One of the things, Andrea, is fascinating is you go from a nurse high school teacher, now you're selling $3 million minimum packages, okay, and up. talk about what goes into the sale of a 3 million, like you're approaching a company, I want $3 million of your money here or more, right? Sometimes much more. Talk about the sales process when it comes to selling that type of high ticket item.
Yeah, well, I'll just cite the Olympic Games. Are those sponsorships were from 3 million to 200 million. So really massive. I'm going to bring us back to the company now, and we're selling $1 million sponsorships, whether that's an airport or a rugby or World Juniors. There are the sales process is one where I believe authenticity and the belief that you have to create a mutually rewarding relationship. It cannot be seen as I've got to go and sell this sponsorship so that I can meet my revenue targets. It's not about that. It's about, again, back to my statement on alignment of vision and values, where we get the partners that we know are aligned with the vision and values of who we are or that property is the key to success. I'll give you an example. We won the right in 2019 to bring the ESPNW brand to Canada. And that was a coup for us. We had been very, very passionate as a company about women in sport. And we saw that women, Rio Olympics, we were doing some research and we thought there's an opportunity for women in sport in Canada. So we went to Corporate Canada in 2016, 17, 18, post Rio. And as you may know, there were more medals won by women in those Olympics than men. And now that's pretty on par. And so we knew the opportunity was ripe. But Corporate Canada wasn't listening. They weren't ready for that yet. And then, so we went to ESPNW. We saw what they were doing in the States to promote women in sport, which is an amazing conference in California every year and one in New York now. And we said, listen, why don't we bring your brand to Canada? And we're passionate about elevating women in sport and business as well. So we won the right, and our first event was supposed to be March of 2020. Obviously, we invested a lot of time and a lot of money to make that an amazing event, and COVID hit. So that was obviously off the table. We came out of COVID and thought, okay, our passion is as deep as it ever was. Our pockets weren't as deep because we invested so much money the first time, but we were passionate. We went back to ESPNW and we said, listen, we want to give it another go. They said, go ahead. So we hosted the first ESPNW conference last year in Toronto. That was a tremendous success. We had thought leaders in the room. We sold out the first, time we ever did it. We'll be doing a second one in May 28th this year. So these events and our passion is what drives us to really pursue the passions that our company has and bring in partners. Back to the alignment is when we launched it, Canadian Tire, amazing company committed to elevating women in sport. So back to my point about alignment is when we approached them and said, listen, we're bringing this to Canada, they jumped on board very quickly. So from my perspective, the sales process is one of being authentic, knowing vision and values are aligned, and ensuring that it's a mutually rewarding relationship. I say to our team all the time, if our corporate partners aren't successful in the property we've brought them on, we're not going to be successful. And I've said it since day one, and I say it too often for the years of our team, perhaps, but it's true. It's got to be a mutually rewarding relationship.
I know, Andrea, you advise companies on. Yeah, I listened to a keynote that you gave, which you were talking about where people or companies are expecting, they're not only just expecting, I forgot how you phrase it, like buttons, just like their placement everywhere, but more on specific goals that they want to achieve and linking that sponsorship to specific goals. So I'm wondering, how do you advise companies to get the most out of their sponsorship? I don't know what would be the best example. I'm curious, maybe there's an airport example. Like what are some things these companies should be doing to get the most out of their sponsorship?
Great question. The days of spots and dots are gone,
Spots and
i.e.,
dots. That's what I was looking for. Yes.
banners and on a rink board. Those days are gone. And sure, eyeballs are important, but what is really important is that the company, when we approach a company, before we even propose a partnership, we understand what their biggest business challenges are. So that may be sales, it may be brand exposure, it may be a rebrand, it may be employee motivation, it can be a number of things. So we get a very thorough understanding of what their business challenges are, what they want to achieve. And then we sculpt bespoke programs, partnerships, in order to achieve those specific business objectives. If we didn't care what they were trying to achieve, the relationship wouldn't work and they'd be gone the next year. So critical to the success of our company is really digging deep and understanding what that brand is trying to achieve and then creating the platform to enable them to achieve it.
I don't know what would be the best example of, this was the biggest challenge or what they were trying to achieve, and then how that sponsorship helped. I don't know if Canadian Tire would be a good example, or just so people can understand, okay, here's what they came in with the challenge, and here's how like a sponsorship and how it kind of played out helped them.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to give you an example of a company that was never involved in sponsorship because Canadian Tire, they're amazing. They do an amazing job. Their commitment to have equal sponsorship, both male and female, is amazing. They're doing incredible things. But I'm going to give you an example because I think it's very telling about the diverse opportunities that our industry offers. And that's a company, Tech Cominco, you probably know it, mining company, never done sponsorship ever. And we approached them to be a partner in the games, Vancouver-based company, made sense. We knew that they were doing a lot of sustainable initiatives, but nobody knew they were doing it. That was their number one problem. This is through discovery. The second problem they had was the mining industry was seen as dirty. And so they had two problems. One, getting the message out about sustainability. And two, their biggest challenge was employee motivation. We created a program for them around the Olympic Games, that Olympic and Paralympic Games, that a huge strategy around employee motivation. I can go into detail if you want, but it was a brilliant program. And then one about how do we sing from the rooftops about their sustainable initiatives that they were doing. They finished the games, and the CEO, Don Lindsay at the time, stood up to his board and said, that was the best investment we ever made. And that is one of the fine examples. And from there on in, they actually brought our company in, TTG Canada, to do a review of where they should be investing their money in sponsorship channels. That's one of the best examples. There's many. Bombardier with the torch relay. I can share that one with you if you want.
Let's stick on the mining company for a second, because you mentioned staff motivation, and I do want to talk about your company and building a team, because I know you are always thinking about the right people in the right seats. But start with the mining company and how the staff motivation played out.
Yeah, so Tech has, as you know, centers where their employees work, where their mines are. And they need to have their employees live in these communities, obviously, and they need those employees to spread the good word about what Tech's doing. So what we did was we held what we called Olympic sports days for the communities, and the employees ran them and could compete in these sports days. They were fun. They were fun, community driven, motivated their employees. It was a very in-depth program whereby we measured their employee satisfaction pre-games, we measured employee satisfaction post-games, and it raised significantly, which is one of the things, as Don Lindsay said to his board, it changed their company culture. And when you change a company culture, that tends to go outward and into their communities and the people that not only did they do business with, but the people in their communities.
What of the things, some of the things you've learned, Andrea, over the years, for as far as that's worked for your company culture?
You know, I have goosebumps as I talk. Right people in the right seats is key for us. We hire on values-based hiring. I can teach skill set, but I can't teach things like good attitude, a team player, passionate, all those attributes. And again, we have values for our company, and we hire on values-based, it's values-based hiring. So when we're interviewing employees, if their values, true to themselves, are not aligned with ours, then we know they're not a candidate. I care more about our people. We have an amazing team, and that is my passion. That actually, at the end of the day, Jeremy, is my passion. Is I want to see all our people, when they walk in our doors, walk out not a better person, a stronger person, professionally, personally. I, founder of the company, truly care that our employees are number one. They are. Of course, I care about our clients and that we succeed and our clients succeed through us. But my number one passion is bringing a team together that is a true team. And I learned that in the organizing committee.
What are some of the things you do in the interviewing process? Because everyone's, I mean, not everyone, but most people they're trying to put their best foot forward. And you kind of have to suss out, okay, does this person, so they're saying all the right things.
Yeah.
What are some of the things you do in the interview process to get to the values of the person?
I'll tell you, it's probe, and probe. And by that, I mean, you go down, they can have a great looking resume and they can have done a great cover letter, but unless you probe and dig under what they've got, you're not going to really know. So I probe. I'll give you an example. I'll say, tell me the top 3 qualities that you as an individual think you can bring to our company. And on the flip side, I'll ask, okay, if you wanted an area of your being to be developed, what would that be? I.e., I don't say weaknesses, but them being honest about being self-aware, what they're good at, what they're not good at. And it's okay. We're all not good at things and we're all good at things. But it's that ability to probe into, if that person's going to come and work for us, how can I help them be better? And really understanding that in their personal development because we care. There's all kinds of probing questions that get to the heart of an individual. And I can give an example and say, in this circumstance, what would you do? And their answer will be very telling. And it's behavioral questions, it's attitudinal questions, it's um, passionate, dedicated team player, huge. So that to me is the most important thing because I'll reiterate, we can teach skill set, but you can't teach things like positive attitude. And it's got to be real. It's got to be real.
On that front, Andrea, are there any of your favorite resources that you found? It could be in hiring, it could be just in business. I know you mentioned EOS when we were talking, Gino Wickman. Any other resources you've looked at that have been influential or important to you? Could be with leadership, culture, hiring.
Yeah, there's lots out there. If you walked into my office in Vancouver, there's books, 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 books. It's basically a library where people can take a book out, read it, and bring it back. And there's a few that stick out. EOS has probably been, and Traction, you mentioned it, is a great book. One of the books that I share with a lot of people is called The Brand Called You. Why? Because I want our individual team players, so all the people that work for our company, to understand who they are first. I encourage people to explore having a personal brand statement. Developing a personal brand statement is a very, very powerful tool if you get it right. And when I say if you get it right, it just doesn't come. It really has to be worked on. And when you know who you are as a person, you can get the best out of you. So that's one of my favorites that I give to our team. There's lots. I'm a studier of emotional intelligence as well. I think that anybody who, self-awareness is a big thing. And I'm a real keener on the study of emotional intelligence because I think that to me is a big piece of a person's being and understanding that. So there's masses of books. I'm trying to think of my favorite author. I met him. It'll come, but yeah, those are the resources that so I think where I'm going is it's about the individual first and then the company. Because if I'm helping individuals being the best they can be, that adds up to our company being the best it can be. If I did it in reverse, I wouldn't, and I wouldn't suggest it. So it's individuals first, and then the company comes second. And I'm a believer in that. And I guess probably my nursing background, teaching background are in that toolkit that I use now.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's really valuable. I'll have to check that one out. The other question I had, Andrea, was about your role and your decision to change roles as the CEO.
Yeah, great question. It's very recent. I've got a team of amazing people headed up by Bart Given, who is our CEO, and I will say a brilliant CEO. He's running the company better than I did, and there's a great quote, and I didn't bring it, but one of the last lines was, "It's all about leadership, and good leaders know when it's time to go." Now, I haven't gone because this is my baby for 14 years. It's like a baby. So I don't care one iota less, but I'm stepping back from being in the company, flying at 30, 40, 50,000 feet, looking at the trends of our industry. Are we on track? How are we doing? Being there to be shoulder to shoulder with each and every one of our team, not just Bart, each and every one of our team. They know my door is always open if they want to have a chat. They need a pick me up, whatever it is. That's the role that I'm now playing, which I love. And I think it's one of my biggest assets is being able to help people lift themselves up. And so I'm not away from the company. I'm still passionate, and I will go on to hopefully do some motivational speaking directed at women in business and women in need. The women in need side will be philanthropic. The women in business side will be to pay my bills.
What was the decision? Because I'm sure there's a lot of CEOs out there thinking of when is the time that I should replace myself as CEO. What were those factors for you?
Yeah, it's a tough one. And people warned me and said, Andrea, like to step away is not going to be easy. And I'm not away, so it's a bit different. But it has been an interesting period in my life, I guess, because you reflect and you say, well, should I, shouldn't I? But what it was for me, Jeremy, was I knew I had a great team. I, I've spent, as you said, over 35 years in the industry, and these young people are far brighter than I, and I have a role to play. But the best role I can play to support the team now is stepping back and supporting them from the sidelines.
What I'm curious, let's say someone's going to be going through this soon or in the future. What were some of the lessons that you learned in transitioning someone into this role successfully?
Yeah. So I would say for the last year and a half, 2 years, Bart really has been running the company with me there. But, I said step into the driver's seat. And then when sort of the day came, which was basically officially this January or maybe last July, Bart did me a really big favor. So he helped me with the transition, and he said, I don't need you in the company, and I don't want you in the company. And that was a huge favor for me. And you realize that, sure, I dedicated my life and I still will to this business and making it successful. As I said, it's like another baby. So the transition, what I would say is communication. And Bart and I have a great relationship where communication, trust is at the core. And when you've got that, transition comes pretty easily.
So it seems like, it became official, but even before it became official, there was a kind of a slow transition period where he kind of slowly just took things over, and then maybe it wasn't official, but like he was actually running things, and then you just kind of made it official with the announcement.
Yeah. You're grooming all the way. Bart's been with the company practically since day one. So you're grooming all the way. And so, yeah, that transition is a gradual. I would never suggest that it's a one day this and one day that. It's a gradual thing to make sure that he feels supported, and that you are ready to go, because I don't want to get in his way, but a lot of people, I'm told, have such a hard time getting away that they're like a board whose nose in, and they're just a pain in the ass to the person running it. So I think we're in a really good spot. And my advice to anybody would be just be really clear with what you want in your path forward and what you want your next CEO to be, and make sure you're communicating that, daily. It comes out in all forms, obviously.
Well, Andrea, I want to be the first one to thank you. Thanks for sharing your journey, your lessons. Everyone can check out ttgcanada.com and twerkstrategies.com to learn more. And we'll see everyone next time. Andrea, thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like 100 grand.